Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're all about getting to the bottom of things here, really exploring those topics that, well, they make you think. And today we're diving into something I bet you've encountered before, maybe even own one yourself, a white elephant. You know what I mean?
Right.
That thing you just can't seem to get rid of. It cost a pretty penny, but now it's just sitting there, not really doing much, just costing you money to keep around.
That's it exactly. It's that possession, as our sources put it, that's
Mhm.
a real pain to get rid of, and honestly, costs more to maintain than it's actually worth.
Right, right. You hit the nail on the head. But it's funny, isn't it, how the meaning of white elephant seems to have grown.
Oh, absolutely.
Like nowadays we use it to talk about these huge projects like buildings, infrastructure, big expensive things that
Mhm.
don't actually give much back. You put all this money in, but the value just isn't there.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's our mission today? Well, we're going to trace the roots of this phrase, how it started, how it changed, and what it tells us about, well, us today. Right.
We'll journey back in time to Southeast Asia and then fast forward to some real head-scratching modern examples.
Let's do it. We got to start at the beginning, right? The term white elephant has deep roots in Southeast Asia, particularly countries like Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. You see, these weren't just, your average light-skinned elephants.
Uh,
They were considered sacred.
Secret elephants.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What made them so special in these cultures?
Well, they believed that having a white elephant, well, it meant the ruler was just and righteous. It was a sign of peace and prosperity for the whole kingdom. It's pretty powerful symbolism even today in places like Thailand and Burma.
So it wasn't like a pet or a mascot even.
Don't know.
This was serious stuff tied to the ruler and the fate of the kingdom.
Exactly. Having a white elephant was incredibly prestigious, a symbol of the monarch's power and wealth. I mean, some even put it in their official titles.
Really?
Yeah, like Hisin Bhushan, a Burmese king. His name means Lord of the White Elephant. It was a big deal. Wow. A status symbol like that, it's hard to wrap your head around. But I have to ask, all this reverence, did it come with, some downside? I mean, why else would it become a term for something that's more of a burden?
You're right on the money with that.
Mhm.
And this is where things get really interesting. You see, getting a white elephant as a gift from the monarch, it was a blessing and a curse, all rolled into one.
Okay. How so?
On one hand, you're in the king's good graces. It's the highest honor. But on the other hand, it was a burden in disguise.
I don't get it. How could a gift, especially one so revered, be a problem?
Well, because these sacred animals, by law and tradition, they couldn't work. Unlike regular elephants, they had no practical use, and you couldn't just give it away.
Oh, I see.
I mean, it's a sign of royal favor, sacred. Imagine being stuck with this massive animal eating you out of house and home, and you can't do anything with it. No way to earn back the cost of its upkeep.
I'm starting to see where this is going. Sounds more like a liability than a gift. So that's the original meaning, the seed of the idea. But how did this concept jump from Southeast Asia all the way to the West?
It started popping up here and there in the 17th century, but really caught on in the 19th. And you know what probably helped solidify it in our vocabulary? P.T. Barnum and his Sacred White Elephant of Burma.
Wait, you're talking about Tung Tulung.
That one and only.
Oh, gotta hear this.
So Barnum, always the showman, spends a fortune and tons of time getting this elephant from the King of Siam. He's advertising it as this magnificent, pure, white, sacred creature. Right?
Yeah.
The real deal. But when it finally arrives,
Yeah.
it turns out to be mostly gray with pink spots. Not quite the dazzling white elephant he promised everyone.
Oh, the irony. You can almost picture the disappointment. Such a gap between what he hiked it up to be and what it actually was.
Right. This whole episode, it probably helped popularize the terms white elephant and gift of a white elephant in the mid-19th century. And then as we move into the early 20th century, we start seeing white elephant swaps and white elephant sales.
Ah, yes. I love those, especially around the holidays. So we went from royal gifts to, like, getting rid of unwanted stuff.
Exactly. Those church bazaars, they became known for these sales where people would donate unwanted items. It was all about one man's trash is another man's treasure. Still a popular use of the term today.
Right, okay. So we've gone from sacred animal to unwanted gifts, but now it seems white elephant is used to talk about much bigger things.
Absolutely. Now, it often describes these expensive projects, big initiatives that either don't work as planned or become way too expensive to maintain. It's the same idea, spending a ton of money for little to no return.
Just like those royal elephants. Cost a fortune but couldn't work.
Exactly. So let's talk about some modern examples. Infrastructure projects are classic white elephants.
Oh, yeah.
Like airports built with such high hopes, and now they're practically empty.
Empty airports, where?
Spain, for one, has a few of those. Then there are dams, bridges, projects that go way over budget, take forever to finish, or end up not being as useful as planned.
Wait, like that state's longest bridge we hear about?
That's one example, yeah. It's almost done, but might not be that practical because things change, budgets got cut. It makes you think, why were these projects even started in the first place?
Yeah, it does. Empty airports, bridges that might not even be used. What other projects fit this white elephant description?
Well, it's not just infrastructure. Think about commercial real estate. Shopping malls, for example, can easily become white elephants if they're too big, in the wrong spot, or just can't attract enough shoppers and stores.
Right.
There's the New South China Mall, sometimes called a ghost mall. Huge development that never really took off.
Wow.
And what about those football stadiums built for big events, and then they just sit there, barely used, draining money? It's a real shame when these grand projects just don't deliver.
It is. Makes you wonder about the planning, the vision for the future.
You're right. And it's not just buildings either. Even rail projects can become white elephants. The Yurika line in Odaiba, Japan, there were worries it would be a huge financial burden. Yeah. And remember that story about the unopened Bangkok MRT station in Singapore? People actually put up paper cutouts of white elephants to protest, highlight not being in service. Pretty clever.
Right. They use the symbol itself to criticize the project. I love that.
And sometimes it's almost like people are self-aware about the whole white elephant thing. The Oakland Athletics baseball team, they use a white elephant as their logo.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, back in 1902, a rival manager called them a white elephant, meaning they were expensive and useless. They just embraced it, turned it into a badge of honor.
That's great. Shows how much this phrase is part of how we think. Any other examples from our research?
Oh, yeah. Some say Al Maktoum International Airport in Dubai might be a white elephant in the making. It's so big and not fully utilized. Then there's the Boothtown Aqueduct in Sydney, this grand Roman-style structure from the 19th century that, well, wasn't very effective at moving water long-term. Even military projects like the U.S. Navy's Alaska-class cruiser, powerful ship, but maybe not so relevant as naval strategies changed. And get this, in Austria, white elephant can refer to unproductive employees that are difficult to fire.
Wow, so it's not just physical things, it's systems, people, everything.
And there's this one example, almost a literal white elephant, a Polish astronomical observatory in the Carpathian Mountains. It's nicknamed White Elephant, simply because of how it looks big, imposing.
So it's not just about cost, it's about this sense of out-of-placeness.
Yeah, grandeur without purpose. And you can see how far this term has come from a specific cultural symbol in Southeast Asia to a universal metaphor for anything costly and impractical.
Quite a journey. It makes me think about our listeners. What white elephants are you dealing with? Maybe at work, in your community? A project that looked promising but ended up being more trouble than it was worth? Something to ponder.
Absolutely. It forces us to think long-term. What's the real value here? Are we getting caught up in the excitement, the prestige, without considering the costs, the actual benefits?
Great point. So let's wrap up. Today, we dove deep into the white elephant. We saw how it started as a sacred symbol in Southeast Asia, a blend of honor and burden. It crossed continents and centuries, becoming a term for unwanted gifts and eventually a way to describe costly and often impractical ventures in our modern world.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did.
And that brings us to our final thought. Think back to the original meaning of the white elephant, tied to prosperity and just leadership. What does it say about us today that we have so many modern white elephants? Are we letting ambition, prestige get in the way of making smart decisions? Who benefits from these projects, even when they don't really work? These are the questions we should be asking.
Food for thought. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Until next time. Forget togas and gladiators.
All right.
Today we are diving into something even more impressive. Ancient Roman engineering.
Yes.
You might wonder why a bunch of structures built thousands of years ago should matter.
Yeah.
But get this. Some of this stuff is still standing and even influencing how we build today.
What's so fascinating about the Romans is they weren't just building for their time.
Right.
They were building for the ages. They thought about things in a way that we're still benefiting from today.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
We're drawing our insights from the Wikipedia article on ancient Roman engineering,
Yeah.
which, let's be honest,
Yeah.
it's probably where a lot of us go for a crash course on pretty much anything.
It's a treasure trove of information.
It is.
And in this case, it highlights the ingenuity of a civilization that shaped the very infrastructure we often take for granted.
And speaking of infrastructure, let's start with those legendary Roman roads.
Yeah.
I mean, the saying, all roads lead to Rome, didn't come from nowhere, right? But seriously, how did they make roads that lasted not just decades, but centuries? Millennia in some cases.
It all comes down to meticulous design and a deep understanding of materials.
Okay.
Imagine a Roman road like a layered cake.
Okay.
Each layer with a specific purpose.
Right.
You've got the base layer, the pavimentum, a thin mortar layer to get things started.
Okay.
Then comes the statumen, a thick layer of stones bound together. Think of it as the road's strong foundation.
It's like they were building the Colosseum, but, laying it flat and driving chariots on it.
Exactly. But it gets even more ingenious.
Okay.
On top of that, they added the rudens, which was basically their version of super strong concrete. This acted like a shock absorber for all the heavy carts and chariots, which is a big reason why their roads could handle so much traffic.
Wait, so they were thinking about things like shock absorption thousands of years ago?
Yeah.
That's wild. But they weren't done yet, were they?
Oh, not even close. Next came the nucleus, even more concrete, but this time they rolled it for maximum compaction.
Okay.
And finally, for the finishing touch, they added the summa crusta, those perfectly fitted paving stones that made the roads smooth and durable.
So it's like they were combining different materials, almost like a recipe,
Yeah.
to create these super strong, long-lasting roads. I'm starting to understand why we're still talking about them today.
Yeah.
But what about obstacles? I mean, the Roman Empire was huge. Surely they ran into a few mountains or rivers along the way.
And that's where their engineering really shines.
Yeah.
Instead of going around obstacles, they went through them,
Wow.
building bridges and tunnels with the same meticulous care they put into their roads.
So they saw a mountain and thought, challenge accepted. That's a whole different level of determination.
And it speaks to their dedication to connecting their vast empire. They understood that efficient infrastructure was key to their power and prosperity.
And speaking of connecting the empire, let's move on to another marvel of Roman engineering aqueducts. We've all seen the pictures.
Right.
But tell me, how did they manage to build these massive water systems without modern technology?
This is where their grasp of physics and natural forces comes in.
Okay.
Imagine trying to get water from a spring in the mountains
Right.
all the way to a bustling city center, sometimes over distances of 10, 50, even 100 kilometers.
Okay, it's a long way for water to travel,
Uh,
especially uphill. How did they do it? Magic.
Laughs.
Yeah.
Not quite magic, but it was ingenious.
Okay.
They understood that water, like everything else, is governed by gravity.
Right.
So they built their aqueducts with a very slight downward slope, allowing the water to flow naturally downhill all the way to the city.
So it's all about a precisely engineered slope. Sounds simple enough, but what about when they encountered, say, a valley? You can't exactly build a downhill channel across a valley, can you?
That's where they got really clever. They used something called an inverted siphon.
Inverted siphon. Okay, you're going to have to break this one down for me.
Imagine you've got a garden hose, and you need to get water over a small hill.
Okay.
You can raise the hose over your head, right?
Okay.
The water flows uphill, even though it seems counterintuitive.
Right.
That's essentially what the Romans did with inverted siphons.
Okay.
They built U-shaped sections of aqueduct that dipped down into a valley and then back up the other side. The water's own momentum built up during its downhill journey carried it uphill.
Okay, that's seriously impressive.
Yeah.
It's like they were tricking gravity.
Right.
But let's be real, it wasn't just a trickle of water for a few fountains, right?
Right.
We're talking about a civilization obsessed with baths, fountains, and who knows what else. They needed a lot of water.
Exactly. And they got it.
Yeah.
These aqueducts could transport a staggering amount of water, up to 1,000 cubic meters per day.
1,000.
That's enough to fill hundreds of swimming pools.
Wow.
And it wasn't just for baths and fountains. They used it for irrigation, sanitation, everything.
Whoa. It's like their version of a modern plumbing system, but on an epic scale. And to think, all of this was powered by gravity and some seriously clever engineering. It makes you wonder if they could do all that with what they had back then, what could they achieve with today's technology?
It's certainly a tantalizing thought, but beyond their mastery of water transport, the Romans were also pioneers in another area, water power. They didn't just move water, they harnessed its energy.
Oh, hold on. So those aqueducts weren't just about getting water from point A to point B. They were also powering things. Tell me more.
Hmm.
You're telling me they had their own version of hydropower?
Yeah,
What'd they use it for?
think a little more practical,
Okay.
but just as revolutionary for their time.
Okay.
They built water mills,
Okay.
using the force of falling water to grind grain into flour. Imagine a massive water wheel connected to a set of millstones. As the wheel turns, powered by the flow of water, it grinds the grain, producing flour on an industrial scale.
Okay, so we're talking about bread here.
Right.
The staple of life. But how big were these operations? Were we talking like a couple loaves of bread, or were they feeding legions with this water-powered flour?
Picture this. One of the most impressive examples is the Barbagal Mill complex in France.
Okay.
They discovered 16 overshot mills, all in a row,
16 mills,
built into the side of a hill.
all powered by water. That's insane. What kind of output are we talking about here?
These mills could produce enough flour to feed tens of thousands of people.
Wow.
This wasn't just a local bakery. This was a sign of Rome's ability to feed cities and armies through ingenious engineering.
It's amazing to think that they figured out how to harness natural resources on such a large scale so long ago. It really challenges the idea that ancient civilizations were somehow less advanced. But hold on, didn't you say they use water power in their mining operations too? I thought that was all about pickaxes and, well, manpower.
While muscle power was definitely involved, the Romans were surprisingly innovative in their mining techniques.
All right.
They figured out they could use water to actually extract the ore from the earth.
Well, like a water pick for mountains. How did that work?
It's called hydraulic mining,
Okay.
and it's remarkably effective.
Okay.
They would channel water into these high-pressure streams and direct it at hillsides. The force of the water would erode the soil, exposing the ore deposits beneath.
That's amazing. Let's talk about working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
But once they'd exposed the ore, did they use water for anything else in the mining process?
They did. Imagine you've got this freshly mined ore, but it's incredibly hot from being deep underground.
Right.
The Romans needed a way to cool it down quickly so they could work with it.
Okay.
What did they use?
What?
You guessed it, water.
Of course.
They would quench these hot rocks with water,
Wow.
rapidly cooling them and making them easier to handle and process.
Clever. It's like they had a solution for everything. But didn't you say there was a theory they might have even used water power for crushing the ore too? That seems like a lot of force for water to generate.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Historians believe the Romans may have used water-powered stamp mills for this very purpose. Imagine massive hammers powered by water wheels pounding the ore into smaller, more manageable pieces.
So instead of people swinging sledgehammers all day, they might have had these water-powered machines doing the heavy lifting. That's mind-blowing.
It's still a topic of debate among historians,
Right.
but the evidence suggests that the Romans were at least experimenting with this kind of technology.
Wow.
And if true, it paints an even more impressive picture of their engineering capabilities.
It's like they were constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible with the technology they had.
Right.
It makes you wonder what they would have achieved with the tools and knowledge we have today.
Yeah.
But speaking of mysteries, didn't you mention something about a Roman engineering puzzle that still has historians stumped?
Yeah.
Tell me more about this.
Remember how we were talking about the Romans' use of water wheels in mining? Well, in the Rio Tinto mines in Spain, archaeologists stumbled upon something that has sparked a lot of debate. Large diameter vertical wheels.
Vertical wheels.
Exactly.
So not like your typical horizontal water wheel.
Exactly. Imagine a water wheel, but instead of lying on its side, it's standing upright.
Okay.
And that's where the mystery lies.
Okay.
No one knows for sure what these vertical wheels were used for.
Okay, now you've really got me intrigued. It's like finding a piece of an ancient machine without the instruction manual.
Mm.
What are some of the theories about these enigmatic wheels?
One theory suggests they might have been part of a sophisticated system for dewatering the mines.
Okay.
Mining at deeper levels often means encountering groundwater, so the Romans needed a way to pump the water out.
Right.
These vertical wheels might have been their solution.
So kind of like an ancient version of a water pump.
Right.
That makes sense. What other ideas are historians considering?
Another possibility is that these wheels were used for lifting heavy loads, perhaps hauling ore or materials up from the mine shafts. We know the Romans were masters of using simple machines to multiply force.
Right.
These vertical wheels could have been part of an elaborate system of pulleys and ropes powered by human or animal labor to move heavy objects.
It's like trying to piece together a giant jigsaw puzzle with a few key pieces missing. Do we have any clues to point us in the right direction?
There are some intriguing hints.
Okay.
We have written accounts of Roman engineers using various types of machinery,
Okay.
including something called a paternoster wheel.
Okay.
Some historians believe this might be similar to the vertical wheels found in the Rio Tinto mines.
So it's not like we're completely in the dark.
Right.
We have some historical breadcrumbs to follow. But it's still amazing to me that even with all we do know about the Roman Empire, there are still these tantalizing mysteries waiting to be solved.
And that's what makes studying history so fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about memorizing dates and names. It's about trying to understand the lives, the innovations, and the enduring legacies of those who came before us.
Speaking of enduring legacies, it's clear that Roman engineering wasn't just about impressive structures. It had a profound impact on their civilization and even on the world we live in today, right?
Absolutely. I mean, their roads helped connect a vast empire. Their aqueducts brought life-giving water to bustling cities. And their use of water power, well, that was revolutionary for its time.
It's hard to overstate the impact of their innovations. Think about it.
Yeah.
Efficient transportation, reliable water supply, and the ability to harness natural resources for power.
Right.
These are all fundamental to any civilization even today.
It's like they wrote the textbook on infrastructure and we're still studying from it.
That's
We've
it.
talked about roads, aqueducts, and even water power.
Right.
What stands out to you as the most impressive feat of Roman engineering?
It's a tough choice, but I think their aqueduct system is particularly remarkable.
Yeah.
The sheer scale of these projects.
Right.
The precise engineering required to maintain a consistent flow of water over such long distances, and the fact that they were using gravity as their primary tool, it's mind-boggling.
And let's not forget the lasting impact. Some of those aqueducts are still standing, and even more impressive, some are still functioning.
I know.
That speaks to the quality of their engineering. It wasn't just about building something that looked impressive. They were building for the long haul.
They were. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from studying Roman engineering, their incredible foresight. They weren't just solving problems for their immediate present. They were thinking about the future, about creating systems that would last for generations.
That's a powerful lesson for us today, especially in a world facing so many challenges related to infrastructure, sustainability, and resource management. Maybe we need to take a page from the Roman playbook and start thinking more long-term.
Indeed. And perhaps equally important is their ability to adapt and innovate. The Romans weren't afraid to experiment, to try new materials and techniques, and to learn from their mistakes. Like those vertical wheels in the Rio Tinto mines. We may not have all the answers yet, but it's clear they were pushing the boundaries of what was possible with the technology they had at hand.
Exactly. And that spirit of innovation is something we can all learn from, no matter what field we're in.
Right.
The next time you encounter a challenge, don't be afraid to think outside the box, to experiment, and to draw inspiration from those who came before you.
Well said. Who knows what we might discover or create if we embrace that Roman spirit of ingenuity. It's been fascinating to explore the world of Roman engineering with you today. What a testament to human ingenuity and the enduring power of, well, engineering.
It certainly makes you appreciate the foundations upon which our modern world is built. And who knows what other secrets and insights are still waiting to be unearthed from the ruins of the Roman Empire.
That's the beauty of history, isn't it? There's always something more to discover. For our listeners who are now feeling inspired to learn more, we'll be sure to include some links to resources in our show notes.
And remember, the next time you're walking down the street, crossing a bridge, or even just turning on a tap, take a moment to appreciate the legacy of Roman engineering that surround us.
Because even after all these centuries, the Romans are still shaping our world in ways we might never have imagined. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Okay, so Leif Erikson, everybody thinks they know, at least the kind of top level, right? Viking dude, sailed west, beat Columbus to the Americas.
Right.
And we're going to do a deep dive today on excerpts from his Wikipedia page.
Okay.
And I got to say, even I was pretty surprised going through this. I thought I knew the basic story,
Yeah.
but there's a lot more to it.
Oh, yeah.
It's really fascinating. So
Absolutely.
we're going to get into it today.
Yeah, this is not just about sort of, planting the flag and saying we got here first, right?
Yeah.
It's about family sagas and political intrigue and, really the kind of human story of exploration and trying to establish yourself in a new and challenging land.
Exactly. Yeah, this is not just about, like you said, planting the flag and getting bragging rights. This is
Right.
about the people who did this stuff and the sagas and all
Yeah.
the richness of that world.
And the challenges, absolutely. I mean, the Norse sagas really offer a much richer understanding of exploration. And,
Yeah.
particularly when you look at the encounters with indigenous peoples and the challenges of establishing a lasting presence in a new world.
Okay, so let's go beyond the Leif Erikson first European and North America thing for a second.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about Leif as a person?
Well, he's depicted in the sagas as this figure of wisdom and strength, striking in appearance. But we have to remember he's inheriting a legacy of exile and conflict from his father, Eric the Red,
Right.
who wasn't exactly known for peaceful diplomacy.
Eric the Red out of Iceland establishes a settlement in Greenland.
That's right. Yeah, big shoes to fill there.
And Leif follows in those footsteps in a way. But there's a love story here too, right?
There is. Leif falls in love with this woman named Thorgunna when he's in the Hebrides, which are these islands off the coast of Scotland, and they have a son, Thorgils.
But she doesn't go to Greenland with him.
No, she doesn't, and it's interesting because the saga mentions this, that Leif wouldn't take her without her family's consent.
Yeah.
So whether this is sort of chivalry on his part or some, intricate Hebridean family dynamic that we're not privy to the sagas, kind of leave that detail ambiguous.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a little hole in the story right there.
A little bit of a mystery.
All right. And then there's this whole question of his conversion to Christianity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Was he really feeling the spirit, or was this a strategic move in a world of, shifting political alliances?
I mean, it's a fascinating question, right? Because on the one hand, we have these accounts where King Olaf of Norway basically tasks Leif with converting the Greenlanders. So you have this,
Okay.
Intertwining of faith and politics, right?
Yeah.
And it makes you consider how often history is shaped by individuals kind of navigating those two things, personal conviction and these external pressures.
Yeah. I mean, how genuine could it have been if he was tasked with this as like almost like a job?
Right, exactly. It makes you wonder.
Yeah. Speaking of mysteries, his death is a bit of a question mark too.
It is.
The Wikipedia entry says he was last documented alive in 1018, but there's no big dramatic ending for him in the sagas.
Yeah. It just seems like after a certain point, he kind of exits the stage of history, which, given the time period, that leaves us with more questions than answers.
Right. Did he die peacefully? Was he lost at sea? Did he run afoul of the wrong clan?
Who knows?
It's very interesting to think about these little mysteries and these little holes in the story.
Absolutely.
But, while his death is a mystery, I think his most enduring mystery is this whole question of where exactly was Vinland?
Well, that's a great point, because we have to remember Vinland wasn't just one place. It was likely a whole region.
That's right. The article mentions two main sagas about Vinland, the saga of Eric the Red, and the saga of the Greenlanders. And they present slightly different versions of what happened.
They do, and this difference is really important because it highlights that these weren't, meticulously researched historical accounts. They were stories passed down, evolving with each retelling.
So the saga of the Greenlanders actually says that Leif wasn't even the first one to lay eyes on Vinland.
Yeah. According to this version, a man named Bjarni Herolfsson, he sees it first after being blown off course, and Leif actually buys Bernie's ship for his own voyage.
Wow, so this guy Bjarni,
Yeah.
he's like a footnote to history.
Right. A footnote who could have been Leif Erikson.
Exactly.
Yeah, what could have been?
Okay, so Leif sets sail, and he names 3 distinct areas, right? Can you run us through those?
Sure. So first you've got Helly Land, which means flat rock land.
Okay.
Pretty self-explanatory. It doesn't sound particularly hospitable.
No.
Then there's Markland or Forest Land, which is considered a more likely candidate for a main landing location
Okay.
because it's got resources, right? Lumber.
Right.
And then finally, you've got Vinland itself described as having grapes, salmon, a pretty nice climate, but the exact location, well, that's still up for debate.
And this is where Lansville Meadows in Canada comes in, right? This archaeological site.
Exactly. It's the only confirmed Norse settlement from that time in North America, and it lines up date-wise with Leif's expedition, but it's probably just one piece of the larger Vinland puzzle.
So maybe Lansville Meadows was Leif's base camp, but he explored further south.
Exactly. We'll get into that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And these sagas, I mean, they're fascinating in their own right because they give us these incredible insights into Viking society and their beliefs and how they understood the world around them.
Oh, yeah.
For instance, they describe Leif's ship as being steered with a steering oar on the right-hand side of the vessel.
The right side. Why is that important?
Well, it might seem like a small detail, but this is actually where we get the word starboard,
Oh, really?
from the Old Norse stiriborei, meaning steering board side.
Wow, that's so cool.
It's amazing how much history is embedded in the language that we use every day.
Yeah, it's like these echoes of the past that have just stayed with us.
Exactly. And these connections go beyond language, too. I mean, the archaeological discoveries at Lansville Meadows provide physical evidence of this Norse presence in North America.
And it's not just like a Viking trinket or something. It's like remnants of a whole settlement, right?
Oh, yeah. Lansville Meadows is remarkable. I mean, it's situated on the northern tip of Newfoundland, and it's got these remains of buildings and workshops, even a sauna.
A sauna?
Yeah, like a Viking bathhouse.
They are really trying to establish something there.
It seems that way. It wasn't just a flyby visit. They were putting down roots.
What about the artifacts they found there? What do those tell us?
Well, they give us an even more detailed picture of what life was like at the settlement. I mean, we're talking ironworking tools, carpentry equipment, and objects that point to trade and cultural exchange.
Like what?
So one of the most significant finds was a small piece of woven yarn, but it was made from butternut wood,
Okay.
which is native to North America. It wouldn't have been found in Greenland.
So they were using resources from further south.
Exactly, which tells us they were interacting with the indigenous population who knew the area and probably trading with them too.
So it's not just Vikings showing up and taking what they want.
Not necessarily, no. It suggests a much more complex interaction between these different cultures.
It makes you wonder how many more stories are out there waiting to be discovered.
Oh, absolutely. Lansville Meadows is likely just one small part of a much bigger picture.
So even with all this evidence, there's still debate about Lansville Meadows. Is it really Leif's settlement? The legendary Leif's boudir?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the debate continues among scholars. While the dates seem to match up, the sagas describe Vinland as having a much milder climate than Newfoundland.
Right.
So some believe that Lansville Meadows may have been more of a base camp, a strategic outpost for exploring further south.
So instead of being their final destination, it was more like a Viking pit stop.
Exactly. A place to restock and repair before venturing further down the coast.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, these were skilled seafarers. They knew how to navigate and establish supply lines.
Absolutely. It was all part of their exploration strategy.
So if Lansville Meadows wasn't their final stop, where was this warmer, more inviting Vinland that they were looking for? What are the best guesses?
Well, the search for the real Vinland has taken researchers down the eastern coastline of North America, and there have been some really promising leads.
How far south are we talking here?
Some theories point to locations as far south as the Chesapeake Bay.
Vikings in Virginia. Now that would be something.
Right. Imagine finding evidence of a Viking longship sailing up the Potomac.
That would rewrite the history books for sure.
It would be incredible.
Yeah.
But more recent evidence suggests that the areas around the Gulf of St. Lawrence might be a better fit.
Okay.
They've got those wild grapes the sagas talk about and other resources that align more closely with the descriptions.
So not quite Virginia, but still a good distance from Newfoundland.
Right, and this southward shift paints a very different picture of Vinland.
It does. It makes you think about the possibilities and how much there still is to learn about this period of history.
Exactly, and it's in these areas around the Gulf of St. Lawrence where we find the most compelling evidence that matches up with the details in the sagas.
Okay, so we're zeroing in on this area. What else makes this region stand out as a potential Vinland? So we're heading south, following those grapes Leif seemed to like so much. Does that mean there were a lot more wild grapes around the Gulf of St. Lawrence?
That's right. Wild grapes grow much better there than in the colder climate of Newfoundland. And don't forget those self-sown wheat fields mentioned in the sagas. Those would have done better further south too, which supports the idea of a milder Vinland.
Like the Vikings found a Viking buffet.
Yeah, basically.
But if everything points south, why is Lansville Meadows still important?
It's still a key piece of the puzzle. It proves that Norse explorers were in North America around the year 1000. It might not have been their only stop or even the main Vinland settlement, but it's a crucial starting point for further exploration.
Like having one piece of a giant jigsaw puzzle. It gets you started and makes you want to find more. So we have this confirmed Norse outpost clues in the sagas and a huge coastline to explore. It's like a historical treasure hunt.
It really is. And even though we haven't found the exact spot yet, each new discovery helps us understand more about Norse exploration and what they did in this new world.
It shows that history is always changing. It's not set in stone. It's a conversation between now and the past.
Exactly.
Speaking of conversations, let's talk to our listener for a second. Why should they care about Leif Erikson and his adventures, even if they're not a history buff?
Leif's story reminds us to think twice about what we think we know about history. We often hear simplified stories, but the past is never that simple. It's complicated, full of twists and turns, and often much more surprising than we first think. Leif's story is the perfect example. It makes us dig deeper and uncover the details that make history so interesting.
It's about real people, like Leif, making brave decisions that affect everything that comes after them, decisions that are still shaping things today.
Right, and by understanding those choices, those meetings with other cultures, we understand more about not just the past, but also our world today and how it came to be.
It's about finding connections, wanting to know more about the world, and knowing that there's always more to discover.
Exactly. History is a journey that never really ends. It's always open to new ideas and discoveries. And who knows, it might even inspire some people to start their own adventures, exploring hidden places or forgotten stories.
Now, there's a thought. As we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Leif Erikson, we've explored his life, his amazing voyages, and the mystery of Vinland. But just like any good adventure, we're left wanting more.
And feeling amazed. I hope Leif's story reminds us that the past never really goes away. It affects us today and will shape our future. There's always more to learn, more to explore beyond the edges of what we know.
What a great way to end. To our listener, we leave you with this. What other hidden stories, what forgotten journeys are out there waiting? And will you be the one to discover them? Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and you never know what you might find. Until next time.
Happy exploring!